True. And my personal experience with him was always very positive, and he was very gifted. He was very imaginative, and he really built the New York City Opera, and I don't think it ever was as great as it was under his aegis. He was terrific. He did great things. Even the works that I did, I remember that The Love of Three Oranges was a brilliant production, and the Turandot was wonderful. I don't think they've had anyone. And I must tell you that at the time that I was at the New York City Opera, Julius Riddell was a coach, and Johnny White was helping everybody with languages. And then they became the boss.
Why was Halasz ousted, or is that really what happened?
I really don't know, but it had some internal problems. It was not anything, had nothing to do with his artistic ability. Had something to do with a business thing, with a double dealing of, who knows, I don't know. But by the way, I have seen Halasz, not in the past 2 years, but he lives out on the island near me. He lives in Port Washington, and I live in Great Neck. And I did do a concert with him a few years back out on the island, and he looks great for his age, and he said some very nice things about me.
So, there you were at City Opera, with him at its helm. How did it all work out for you?
It worked out pretty well, except that was the year, this was shortly after my Traviata with Tibbet, so it must have been in the early 50s, that I started getting some critical reviews in the New York paper, and that's something else I found very hard to take. Any kind of criticism, and I think that may have steered me into the musical field, the operettas or the Broadway show. I couldn't stand every time I'd open my mouth to wait for the newspapers the next day. It really used to bother me. I was too young to be able to take criticism, but it was one of the reviews in, I think, the Herald Tribune at the time that I decided, gee, I better go to a voice teacher. In fact, that's on the Mike Wallace tape. I revealed that when I did that interview with him, that it suddenly dawned upon me, gee, maybe I'm not as great as I think I am, and maybe I could use some help. I don't know.
So you went to a voice teacher. Was that a good thing?
Yes, I did. Well, I don't think I went to the right one at the time. He didn't do too much for me, didn't help me that much.
Did he hurt you?
No.
Who was it?
Did not hurt me. Do you want to know who it was?
Yeah.
Joseph Rainius. I have to, thank God, all my voice teachers have expired, so nobody can sue me. They're all dead. Joseph Rainius was a very good teacher. But since I had already done too many things to my throat, I needed somebody who was very sensitive to my particular problem.
What was your particular problem?
Well, I had this very excessive vibrato at the time, and I needed somebody to straighten that out, and he really wasn't able to do that. But I will say about him that my colleague and friend, Phyllis Curtin, studied with Joseph Rainius for a long period of time, and she thought he was the greatest.
Did offers begin to dry up?
Not really, because right after my debut season at the City Opera, I got into that spectacular My Darling Aida, the show at the Winter Garden, and I went again into the Broadway scene, although it was the music by Verdi and practically the opera intact, and I played Aida, and I had quite a big success in that. I got great reviews. But that's a whole different ball game. That's a Broadway show based on an opera.
Still, there you were at about age 20, or
right,
singing Aida 6
times a week. That was not easy, I must tell you. That was a very difficult experience, and I finally gave up. I had never had to do the matinees because everybody knew that would be too much. But I gave up one of my evening performances, and that was performed by Eileen Schauler.
Do you think it a mistake to have done that?
I do.
Why?
I really do. It really put too much of a burden on my throat. It was very difficult for me. But I got through that, and that was a miracle. And Mr. Bing was very interested in me, I must tell you. He came to see me in the show, and he came backstage, and he said to me, "You should not be doing this." And I said, "You're right." He was really very nice to me, and I haven't. And so were all the great people were all wonderful.
So were you feeling a lot of consternation then? There you were trying to hold up under the strain of too many performances of too heavyweight a role?
Fortunately, it didn't last beyond 3 months. So that was good luck. That didn't last that long. By the way, Dorothy Sarnoff was my co-star in that. She played the Amneris role. But since the entire situation changed from Egypt to and Ethiopia to the Civil War period in the South, and I was a slave girl, and Dorothy, as Amneris, played the plantation owner's spoiled brat daughter. It was rather interesting. And there were some wonderful people in it, by the way.
Yes?
Yes. Remember Olive Moorfield? Olive Moorfield became quite a famous opera singer, and she lives in Germany. And there was another famous black singer in it. And William Dillard was in it. A lot of good people.
In case you just tuned in, that hysterical music in the background is in an adjacent auditorium. You are not mistuned. Your equipment probably is functioning correctly. My guest, of course, is Elaine Malbin. Waiting patiently in the wings are Joe Pierce and Bob Connolly. I'm Stefan Zucker. This is Opera Fanatic on WKCR-FM New York. Next Saturday, from 10:30 in the evening till 2 in the morning, Bellini's La Straniera with Montserrat Caballé guest. Then on March 20th, Mascagni's two puzzlingly different recordings of his Cavalleria Rusticana. One live from Holland, 1937, with Lina Bruna Raza, Antonio Melandri, and Afro Poli. The other, a studio recording from 1940 with Lina Bruna Raza, Beniamino Gigli, and Gino Becchi. Both are conducted by the composer. Now, some of you may remember that when Bernstein came to do Cave at the Met more than 20 years ago, he adopted what many thought excessively slow tempi, justifying them on the grounds that Mascagni had taken them in his studio recording and further had endorsed them. Bernstein apparently was unfamiliar with the live performance recording with very, very different tempi. What would he have made of it? What will you make of it? The two recordings together raise many issues about Cavalleria. Then on the 27th, 10:30 until 2 in the evening, Pasquale Amato, Mattia Battistini, Gino Becchi, Carlo Galeffi, Apollo Granforte, Riccardo Stracciari, and Tita Ruffo discussed. Baritone Theodore Lambrino's guest. You've been talking about baritones. Many of you will sample some of these Italian baritones and pit them against one another and see what you've got to say about them. I've no doubt that Theodore Lambrinos will have a great deal to say. Back to Elaine Malbin, the next milestone.
Why did they choose a voice of your type for Aida?
Well, I think the people who were in charge really were not looking for a voice for Aida. They were looking for a type and a girl who could act the part and look the part and sing the music. And since I had this full lyric soprano voice, I could handle it, and I could handle it. I mean, look, Mirella Freni does Aida, right? Yeah. And she's a lot older than I was then, right? I could sing through the notes, and I could sing the arias today. But I don't know that I would be singing Aida at the Metropolitan Opera. They weren't looking for a big, heavy voice. They were looking for someone who could play the part and could sing the role.
Is it easier to get through at age 20 than 30 years later?
Well, I don't think so. I think now that I know how to sing, it probably would be a lot easier for me to do it today. Because I know I have a technique where I don't use my throat when I sing that much. I sing with a lot of head voices, which is what Bing thought I should have had when I was 19. So I finally learned it in the past, say, 10 or 15 years, how to do that. And I know how to pace myself, and in those days I just would give everything at all times.
My darling Aida folded. What then?
Well, then I started the series of operas that I did for the National Broadcasting Company. And of course, I was also sent out to make the records with Mario LANZA before the Aida. By the way, I have brought 2 of those excerpts with me.
Shall we play some?
I'd like to. I think the next thing on the little tape I brought is the Traviata with Mario LANZA. And people always say to me, what kind of voice did he have? Even Jan Pierce said, he doesn't have a big voice, does he? And I said, yes, he does. All the other tenors wanted me to say, oh, he has a little voice, but it's souped up by the microphone. But in truth, he had a big, gorgeous voice.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I heard other people say that, that he had a good-sized voice.
Oh, yes, he did.
But the general opinion is something else. And
yeah, and he had a tremendous talent also. As a matter of fact, we had a person in common who was very helpful to us both, and that person was Peter Herman Adler. Peter Herman Adler actually discovered Mario LANZA when he was with something called the Bel Canto Trio for Columbia artists, and Peter Herman Adler was the artistic director of all the NBC operas that I did, and of the NBC Opera Company. He was great. Unfortunately, he passed away, I think, a year or 2 ago in his 90s, but he was a great person. And now you asked me about my music schooling. My music schooling consisted of Fausto Clava, Eric Leinsdorf, Dimitri Metropolis, and Peter Herman Adler. Now, what better training could a person have?
Are you playing both duets, the Traviata?
Yes, I'd like to.
The reason I ask is because this may be the only time your listeners will ever hear a Violetta who's actually the right age, in fact younger than Violetta, and just about the right age for Butterfly.
That's true.
Now, that racket in the background will probably go away in a bit. The university rents out the auditorium from which that is issuing to organizations putting on bashes of one kind or another. Usually the bashes end before the show does, so there's some hope. Apologies. When we come back to talking, I'll ask Elaine Malbin about those maestros and what she learned from them, what they emphasized in coaching. The number here, 212-854-5223. That's 854-5223. Opera Fanatic. Also, we'll explore her feelings, why she ended it all some years later, withdrawing from her career, and what is prompting her now to reemerge.
Voice of Firestone, the program that brings you America's best-loved music, featuring Howard Barlow and the Firestone Orchestra and Chorus, and the soprano star of opera, television, and concert stage, Elaine Malbin.
If I could tell you of my devotion, if I could pledge all my love for true, then my confession would find expression in all the music my heart
Another opening of another show. No event in the world can equal the glittering excitement of an opening night on the most famous street in the world, Broadway. The crowd, the lights, the furs, the flowers, the critics. Will it be a success or a failure? Legend has it that there's a broken heart for every light on Broadway. But legend and history also tell us about the successful opening nights on Broadway, too. Nights that remain forever in our memories because they've given us great stars, great hits. Such a night was the 3rd of December, 1953. The night when the curtain went up on a new Wright and Forrest work called Kismet.
Thank God, behold, ting-ting-a-ling of old. Thank God, bright shiny beam.
Libiamo negli aeri callici che la bellezza infiora e là fuggeva l'ora sinebria voluta. Libiamo i dolci fremiti che suscita l'amore, poiché quell'occhio al cuore onnipotente va. Libiamo amore, amor fra i callici più caldi baci avrà.
Godiamo una gira più
quando non sa mia ancora.
Maldivia che lei vorrà.
Al mio destin sì. E beviamo la consolata del cantico la nostra bella rilusiamo ogni questo paradiso mi scoppare mori
So, we're to the Traviata, the Brindisi, with Lanza, preceded by a few goodies. Elaine Malbin, what were they?
The goodies? The goodies were from the show Kismet, in which I starred on Broadway at the Ziegfeld Theater, in which my character sings Baubles, Bangles, and Beads, and the beautiful And This Is My Beloved. Of course, that music is based on the Borderdine music as arranged by Forrest and Wright.
Among photos you've given me is one with Metropolis, looking as if seeing a far-off vision. You coached with him?
Yes, I did, and I sang with him, too. I sang with Metropolis at the Lewiston Stadium. Remember that?
Indeed.
And the Robin Hoodell.
What was he like as conductor, and what did he have to offer as coach?
Well, he was an electric personality. Every great conductor has a very unique characteristic, and the one thing I remember about him is that he was an extremely exciting, great musician. He reminded me, if you think of a singer who was, if I could compare the personality and the singing of Luba Velic and Salome to Metropolis, it was that kind of an excitement and tension with him.
I always thought that in Italian opera he was somehow less than convincing, that the flow wasn't there, the tempi inappropriate. He was revered by many. I thought the reputation founded on his work in symphonic music, German music in particular, and wondered whether he was worthy of the fuss over him as a conductor of Italian opera.
Well, I don't know about him with Italian operas. It turned out I actually did Carmen with him. I did the role of Michaela at these two open-air stadiums, and I loved singing with him. I thought he was superb.
Was his technique such as to make singing easier somehow?
For me, it was. But I know a lot of people who didn't enjoy singing with Fausto Claver, and I loved singing with Claver. He was very precise and very difficult, but if you sang the way it was written, he was very happy and was very supportive.
What were they like as coaches? Were there characteristic insights they each had?
Well, Claver really coached me in many operas. From the time I had met him when I was about 19 and did the Traviata with him, he taught me Bohème and Butterfly. And his main thing was to be very true to the way the music was written on the page. Of course, it was mostly Puccini that I studied with him, and everything is clearly written. And he loved the fact that I could express the emotion within the correct timing and within the musical phrase. Because sometimes people make too many rubati and drag out phrases, and he was so insistent. He was almost metronomic in his beating, but he also wanted the power of the emotion within the musical phrase.
Still, you describe him essentially as a répétiteur, somebody who pounds notes into singers and gets them to sing the right rhythms and pitches. What about expression?
Well, with me, he brought a great deal of it out, and I wouldn't consider him a repetiteur at all. I think he was a great coach.
How did he bring it out? What did he do?
By discussing the meaning of the text and the musical line, and that this is at a certain crescendo, this is where the emotion must come out. Because as many great singers will say there's a great deal of drama without the words, just within the music itself.
And Leinsdorf, and rather...
I loved Leinsdorf, by the way.
Now, he has the reputation of being a martinet, hated by many.
Well, I think I have to say, Stefan, that I am a very musical singer. I observe the notes as written values. I usually sing the meaning of the text, and I never had any real problem with any of the great conductors. With less than great, I've had problems. When something was too slow and I would ask the conductor to move along or to change the tempo, then I would have problems. But I did sing with Leinsdorf and Metropolis and Ormandy, who did Traviata. I did Traviata with him in Philadelphia. And I've recently sang with Lucas Foss, by the way, and he said to me, "How do you like it? How do you want it to go?" I said, "Oh God, I thought you were going to you were going to tell me how it should go."
Who were some with whom you did have difficulty?
Let me think. In conductors, well, names that you might not remember, Siegfried Landau, for example. I think I did a bohème with him someplace down south, and we didn't get along too well musically.
What was the problem?
Oh, and sometimes with Edwin MacArthur in St. Louis, because I did a number of operettas with him. He was a difficult guy, but he was fine too. He was
a difficult guy, and one whose ability often was in question so far as press and musicians were concerned. Mm-hmm. What was your appraisal?
Beg pardon?
What was your appraisal of MacArthur?
Well, I never sang any classical music with him. It was always operettas in St. Louis. I thought he was difficult, that's all, and demanding, and didn't help me vocally.
Unreasonably so?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah. Sometimes. We'd get very angry over nothing.
Yeah, I knew him slightly. I even invited him to the show, and he had an outburst at me because I wouldn't adjust the time of the broadcast to accommodate his early schedule. I tried to explain that I couldn't, and that if we did go on air earlier, we'd have few listeners. He lost his temper at me. My attitude was, "Dear God, from this has-been, I have to die."
Well, you shouldn't even say that he was a has-been, but he was the accompanist and conductor for Kirsten Flagstad, and I think that he perhaps didn't realize the great adulation that he wanted from the public with other singers.
He was pushed to some extent into conducting by Flagstad. He was her accompanist, and she loved him, and she was crazy about him, and suddenly he was conducting Wagner at the Met. We had him as a guest at a Gramophone Society meeting back in the early or middle 60s, and I remember he spent a disproportionate share of the time complaining about a pirate set of Flagstad's final Carnegie Hall performance for which he wasn't receiving royalties, and he must have mentioned it 10 times in the course of 2 hours.
Well, tenors, you've got a picture of yourself looking quite lovely and natural, singing or about to sing at a mic with Tucker posing dreamily.
Yes.
The far-off look in his eye. What was he like to sing with?
He was lovely. He was, first of all, his voice is magnificent, was magnificent. He was a sweet man. My experience with him was always lovely. I did a couple of performances with him, and he was so very supportive of me. He thought that I should definitely be singing at the Met and should have concentrated on opera and not done at least half of the things that I had done. As he lived in Great Neck, by the way, before he died, and I came to Great Neck about 20 years ago after I married, and I had one child, and now I had 2 now. But he lived in a house near mine, and he would say to his wife, Sarah, "Why don't we have Elaine over more often?" And she'd say to him, "Because you are never home."
Was he egomaniacal even when compared to other tenors?
I don't think so. Not compared to other tenors, certainly, and certainly not around me. One which I understand and admire, when I did sing with Tucker, he really was completely focused on himself, his throat, And what he was doing, he would not speak. And I must say, I don't talk on the day that I sing. I remember he'd have a scarf around his neck, and if you tried to address him, he would do with his hands, no, don't talk to me. And he had his thermos with him, and his wonderful wife, who really took care of him backstage or in the wings, helping him in every way. But I don't consider him overly egotistical, and he was a great singer, and he was a wonderful colleague to me.
What was in that thermos?
Probably tea, hot tea.
And Jan Pierce?
Jan was fun and was great. You know, actually Jan was helpful to me in certain ways. After the famous Traviata with Tibet, I was engaged to sing at the Robin Hood Dell, because RCA Victor was doing the booking of the Dell at the time, and they needed a lyric soprano since Dorothy Kirsten had just gone over to Columbia Records. And so I had the privilege of singing with Leonard Warren and Jan Pierce at the Robin Hood Dell, which was a fantastic place. And it was then that Jan Pierce said to me, "You have a terrific voice," he said, "but you don't know how to sing." So here we go again. He took me to William Herman, who was my third voice teacher, after Joseph Rainius and Madame Hilma Otto, the lady in Brooklyn. And Herman actually was teaching Jan Pierce at that time. But he also became quite well known for having produced Roberta Peters. Roberta was really his protege, because Roberta started to study with William Herman when she was 13. All the years that I was already singing out in the world, Roberta was studying, and Herman was a great teacher for Roberta, I think. Whether he was such a great teacher for me, I'm not so sure now that I hear myself with and without, before him and after him and during him. But he was very knowledgeable about what a singer must be able to do in a real career, which very few teachers today understand. The first thing he understood was that a singer must be able to be heard over an orchestra if you want to be an opera singer. So he had a tendency to push my voice, certainly, if not other voices. And he also was very strict in terms of doing all kinds of scales, which he did more with Roberta than with me, since she was trained as a coloratura. What he tried to do for me was try to enlarge my voice so that the voice would equal the temperament. And that may not have been the most intelligent thing to do.
How did he attempt that?
Well, he was very big on using physical gym equipment. He would have me hold medicine balls in front. In fact, I did Salome on television as well as on the stage with Marisa Bravanel. But for the telecast, I trained for 6 months. He sent me to a gym. It was a wonderful gym called Pilates. And I used to work out there and do all kinds of pulling of tension and trying to get more strength in my body, which he felt would impart itself to my singing. And I will say that I did get through the Salome with flying colors. And I did it also, as I said, with a Bravanel. And a Bravanel told me at the time that I was the best Salome that he ever worked with. And I said, "You mean acting-wise?" He said, "No, I mean singing-wise."
Do you feel that the approach has no merit, barbells and all?
It has some merit, yes. Some. But sometimes my voice definitely got larger, but perhaps at the expense of the quality of the voice. And that happens all the time when you hear some singers whose voices become a little bigger, they become a little harder, or they encounter new problems.
Do examples come to mind?
You mean other singers?
Yes.
Well, am I going to get sued? Well, for example, look at Katia Ricciarelli. There's an example. Now, she's basically a lyric soprano, a light lyric soprano, and she's pushed her voice quite a lot. And I think even Freni. I mean, when Freni started, I think that the quality of her voice was exquisite, and I am one of the few who don't think that there's an improvement in this dramatic quality in her singing.
Some years ago, I lived with a singer's accompanist, Judy, who played for Jan Pierce. He did chase her around the piano, Fortunately, from her point of view, at that point, he could barely walk.
Huh.
What was your experience, Elaine Malbin?
I'm pleading the fifth.
I can imagine. I was confident in Judy's ability to elude him, but that was in more recent years. Did you elude him?
I did. But he was fine. He was a wonderful colleague, and he always was very helpful to me, actually. And I enjoyed singing with him, certainly. And by the way, he was a great singer. He had a beautiful voice, and he was a superb musician.
Do you happen to know why he and Tucker hated one another?
No. And I don't know that they really did hate each other. I think there was, of course, competition. Do you know?
Oh, I don't know what to believe. I've heard many accounts.
What have you heard?
Oh, boy.
In the book and in the biographies of them, I got the impression that Pierce felt that Tucker was ungrateful for his assistance because he was quite a star before Tucker even went into opera. And that, I don't know if that's true or not, but that he felt that way, and Tucker resented it very much, and so they just didn't speak for 25 years.
I don't think that's really the true reason. And if I knew, I wouldn't say.
Yeah.
First of all, I do know the Tuckers. I know Barry, and I think they're doing a fabulous job with this foundation. They're helping a lot of young singers. I think sometimes they choose singers who don't need the help.
Exactly. That's
right.
my criticism.
Well, that's become that way. It didn't used to be that way. But they are a wonderful family, and I also know Mrs. Pierce quite well, and I would not even venture to say why they didn't like one another.
Brian Sullivan.
Oh, that's a tragedy, I must say, and there are others. Brian Sullivan was a sweet tenor, sweet Irishman, handsome, strapping guy, and Brian and I sang together frequently. We did a couple of concerts at the Robin Hood Dell, and I think at Lewiston Stadium. We did the Butterfly Duet together, and we also appeared in the Student Prince at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles, and that was a several-week run, and I really loved Brian. And when I heard that he drowned in some terrible accident or suicide attempt, I was very, very upset and distraught. And I must say, the career, there are so many tragic ends to this. It's just, it should be a happy, wonderful career. Frankly, I think that in spite of myself, I should be very happy and proud of my past.
In interviews over the years, to describe yourself, you've used words such as lonely, isolated, miserable. Halasz is thought to have committed suicide, as is Brian Sullivan. Just how down were you emotionally? What was it like, and can you say why?
I really think in my case it goes back to my very young childhood when I didn't have the kind of family life that a child would have wanted. And then came this early career, which had two opposite poles. One was the success and the adulation and the applause. And then on the other hand was the fact that I was always alone. I was in Europe when I sang in Glyndebourne, which most singers would be thrilled to do. Carl Ebert, who ran Glyndebourne, noticed that I was very unhappy, and he could not understand why I was unhappy. I couldn't stand being so alone. It just wasn't. I wasn't able to embrace to be so happy with the singing that I could forget the fact that I was always by myself, and I just couldn't handle it. Now, had I had a good psychiatrist at the time, things might have changed for me. I say that facetiously, but in truth, that's exactly what I should have had at the time.
Is that what you ultimately did?
Yes, I did. I don't know that I finished up correctly with that, but I had a wonderful doctor whom I liked very much. Unfortunately, he passed away. He was really my best friend. And I would always say to him, I'm not ready. And he said, you are ready. You should be at the Met now. You should go and sing for Bing again tomorrow. But I never could bring myself to do it.
Returning to your tenors for the moment, Frank Boretta.
Well, I really didn't know Frank that well. He was with the NBC Opera Company. We had a touring company which emanated from my Madama Butterfly, which was one of the biggest successes of my career. Frank is a very handsome, charming guy, but I wouldn't exactly call him one of the great tenors. Certainly not of all the tenors I've sung with, I'll tell you who was a great tenor whom I loved. Bob Rounceville was one. Sang with Bob quite a lot. David Polari, wonderful singer.
Was he as tempestuous as one might think?
Yes, he's the guy who walked off stage and told Joseph Rosenstock to finish it himself just before he was supposed to kill Carmen. But he was a good colleague. I never had any problem with David. He should have had a great career. Unfortunately, he was killed in an airplane crash.
Listeners may know him from the Tales of Hoffman film.
No, that's Rounceville.
Oh, that was Bob Rounceville, right.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what David would have been. He was with the New York City Opera for quite a while.
Many records, but he was on the Saint.
He had a beautiful voice. Right, he was the original whatever character in the
Faust with Charles
Yes,
Lynch.
he was a wonderful young singer.
Too many high notes. My brain did a flip-flop.
My brain has a problem too.
we talking. Well, you're a soprano. Right. We were talking about one tenor. And
I think that if we talk about one of the highlights of my career, you have to talk about my Madama Butterfly. Now, I've been trying to locate a kinescope or tape of that telecast because that was probably the absolute height of my singing career, and I had a fantastic success. And there was also the moment when I decided I didn't want that singing career. I had just done the Butterfly, and I had accolades from my colleagues, including Roberta Peters, Jan Pierce, Richard Tucker. Bing Crosby wrote me a handwritten letter complimenting me on my performance. Cesar Romero. These are people I had never met. Who wrote the play, the director of the Players. Directors, artists tell me how great I was. And at that time in my life, I decided I really didn't want to sing at all.
How come?
Don't know. You want to know the truth? I needed to have some fantastic man in my life. And I didn't have him.
We'll come to all that. Before then, you began to appear on TV, not only here, but on the BBC. How did that come to pass? Well,
one of the directors of the BBC happened to see a kinescope, which is like a film of my Il Tabarro, the one that I had done in New York, which was with Robert Weedy, by the way, and Davis Cunningham, another very fine tenor. And he fell in love with me, actually. And he contacted me through National Broadcasting Company and said he'd like to bring me over to London to do the telecast of that opera there. And so I went over to London and I did that, and they, of course, in English is called The Cloak. And I don't remember the name of the baritone, but it was a very well-known, I'll tell you, it was a very well-known baritone. And then I went on to do Pagliacci with Peter Glossop, whose name I'm sure you know. And then I did a new opera that was written by Sir Arthur Bliss called Tobias and the Angel in London. And today I was reminded that I also sang Minnie in The Girl of the Golden West in London. And that is a very dramatic part, as you know.
However did you come to undertake Minnie?
Well, on television I could do it, but I will admit that that's one part that I wouldn't want to play on the stage, although I adore the role, and some of the music is fantastic. And what was interesting to me, since I heard part of the broadcast from the Met today with Dimitrova, is that she belted, which she shouldn't have to do with that huge voice of hers, but she was belting away in the chest voice that surprised me, because I would have to do that with my lyric voice singing that music, but she felt that she had to do it also.
What was your highest note at age 14?
At age 14, I hardly sang over a C. but ask me what my highest note was at 17 and 18.
Please.
E flat. In fact, the highest note I ever sang on stage was an E when I did Rigoletto in Pittsburgh, but it wasn't a very successful one. I was always basically a lyric soprano, maybe a lyric coloratura, but I had never been trained as a lyric coloratura. I always sang big voice parts.
And your range today?
I would say I wouldn't try the E flat, but I can certainly sing the D.
Your most beautiful note?
My most beautiful note? Well, probably around between the A and the high C. G. G's a very good note for me. G's a very good note for me.
Do you use chest voice?
I do, but not too high.
How high do you take it?
Not higher than an F, and rarely then.
So you're of the old school there, where
yes.
that was frowned on strongly.
Well, if you hear all of my tapes, you'll see that I use a lot of chest voice, naturally. Including the G in the Sempre Libera. They're all Gs.
So you think that Verdi perhaps was unreasonable in specifying that Amneris should be able to sing, I think, was A's and B flat and B
I didn't know
chest.
that Verdi asked for that.
Yeah, in a letter. Yeah, he demanded
Is
that.
Is that so?
Indeed,
yes, I do. Even for a mezzo. I mean, a mezzo... I know the mezzos that I know, including Frederica von Stade, they will bring their chest voice up to an F sharp and a G, but I think...
Come to be.
Well, I had become a personality by way of my television appearances on NBC, because I really was one of the pioneers of the opera on TV. I mean, I really have to laugh when I hear my dear colleague Miss Sills say that she was the first one to bring opera to television, because that is ridiculous, because she never had the opportunity to do so, which I think that she has expressed some disdain about in one of her many books. So as a result of my appearing before millions of people, I became a household name, more or less, and also with the fact that I had sung on Broadway in My Darling Aida, in the Gilbert and Sullivan, and also in Kismet. I was offered. I had new other agents like the MCA. I had a classical management. I had Hurok in the beginning, and then from Hurok I went to Columbia Artists. And when I was with Columbia, I also had the MCA, Music Corporation of America, and the people who were representing artists there represented those shows, Perry Como and Sullivan. And I was offered dates, and of course Sullivan loved opera singers on his show. He always had some singer.
Can I interrupt?
Do that? Yeah.
You said before that people of a certain age might not be as familiar with Miss Malbin as others. I would say somebody under, let's say, the age of 45 wouldn't be able to understand how she really permeated the media to a large extent in the 50s, the way, say, Beverly Sills might have in the 70s. But there was also, no, I mean, no, I don't mean that as a comparison, except that you were all around, you were all over the place, and everybody knew who she was, even if they weren't opera lovers, because there wasn't as the gulf that exists now between popular and classical music. Mm-hmm. People who loved, let's say, the popular music of the day, Perry Como could also very much enjoy Elaine Malbin singing something, and vice versa. Whereas today, they're completely separate fields. And you can't find a television show, for instance, a popular television show that will ever have an opera singer on it.
Unfortunately, that's true. And they don't have the opportunities that I certainly had. Right. Mm-hmm. I just want to say the only person who's still doing things and is as popular is the director, Kirk Browning. Kirk did all of the operas on NBC that I did, and he is still directing major musical events for PBS.
Yeah, you see his name
all the time. Right.
Him and Brian Lodge.
Exactly.
All the time.
Right.
I'm looking here at what appears to be the cover of the magazine of the New York Herald Tribune. I don't see a date on it. And it says, it's got pictures all over it of Elaine Malbin. It says, "Please stop killing me," pleads pretty Elaine Malbin. She's perished in 9 straight roles. And she's got the cover story there. Joe Pierce, an honest answer. In 1958, which name was better known to the American public? Halasz or Malbin?
That's an honest answer. I would say Halasz had hit the headlines a lot in the last couple of years, but probably as a musical personality, Elaine Malbin was much better known to the American public.
Thank you.
Because again, being on, you use the name Como or Sullivan, people don't realize that those were the major television shows of their time. When you were on those shows, you were being seen by 30 million people, 40 million people at one sitting. And if you came on and just sang 2 songs and went off, you'd just been seen by more people than would see you in opera houses if you're from the beginning to the end of your career.
Elaine Malbin, when Joe Pierce mentioned Beverly Sills, you scowled.
Well, only because I read the publicity that denotes her as the pioneer of opera on TV and popularizing opera through the medium of TV. But we did it years and years ago, and she wasn't on any of those shows. People who were on, Leontine Price, with whom I sang the dialogues of the Carmelites, she did Tosca on NBC, but I was the mainstay. I did more leading roles than I suppose than any other opera diva at the time.
I remember, I mentioned this to you when we spoke the other day, I remember her doing a Nedda on the NBC Opera, and unless I'm badly mistaken, they had that on about 11 o'clock at night. And believe me, every opera lover in the country was up watching it.
That I don't remember. I don't remember the time, but I do remember that there was a problem with the photography. Do you remember that?
No.
And,
why did it die? Early opera on early TV?
Because it cost too much money and NBC was not willing to subsidize it. That's why it died.
Toward the very end of the NBC opera days, they were bringing in a lot of people who you would never have expected to see with the NBC, like Cesare Schiappi doing Don Giovanni in English. And, who's going to learn an opera in English for one performance and never sing it again?
That is very true. But actually, I think the voice of Firestone did a lot of good things because I was on many times on the radio before they went on TV, but they started to do little vignettes from operas, and that's what they're now these Voice of Firestone videos that are being put out.
You're on 2 of those.
Yes, and I was surprised that I wasn't on more, but I guess I'm not too realistic. I'm very friendly with Lois Hunt and Earl Wrightson, who live near me, and I said to Lois, my God, you people were on a lot. How come they haven't released any of your Firestone shows? And Lois said to me, people don't know who we are. And the only reason the Firestone, whoever's putting them out, VAI, I think it's called, they are putting out Metropolitan Opera names only, which I think is a big mistake. When I went looking for some of the discs that I had from all the shows that I did with Firestone, there are a lot of big names on them with me, apart from me. And for instance, the one with Sándor Kónyer, and then I have a broadcast that I did with, what was the name of the tenor, Campera. And they're beautiful. They're beautiful. And I think that they would sell virtually by the name of Voice of Firestone Presents. And I was annoyed that I wasn't on any of them. And finally, I heard from the producers asking for permission to release mine. I said, well, by all means, how come you took so long? And they put me on a very fine one called The Voice of Firestone Presents Verdi, and with great singers on it, including Robert Merrill and Richard Tucker and Leontine Price and James McCracken. I think it's one of the best that they've put out, and I think they should do more of them.
You're also in a duet from Traviata.
Oh, that's right. That's with me.
With Merrill. Yeah.
They would do a great service by putting out videos of people who didn't record so much commercially.
I think so.
So it sounds as if after giving it up, you regret that you regret the loss of the limelight. Your old kinescopes are not circulated the way they might be. Yes,
and I also would like to see them. First of all, I think that some of the programs that I was on were fabulous. For example, The Butterfly was really superb. I'm very proud of that one.
I'll try to help you dig that up.
That would be great. I happen to have a kinescope of Salome, and that's very interesting and very good. it's interesting because two of the characters were played by actors. The role of John the Baptist is played by John Cassavetes and was sung by an old friend of mine, whose name just escapes me, of course. And the role of the page was played by Sal Mineo.
So, in 1959, your series on of complete operas on American TV came to an end when NBC refused to continue funding. What then?
Well, what then? Different things that I have done since then. I sang with the San Francisco Opera. I was with them just 2 seasons.
Pêcheur?
I did the Pearl Fishers, right? I did Mimi and Bohème, and I sang Carmina Burana. And then I also did, of course you must understand that I was always doing tours all through the United States. I appeared as Mimi with Sarah Caldwell, and that's the Boston Opera Company, a Bohème. I did a Richard Rogers and Hammerstein tour that went on tour, and my very good friend William Metcalf, baritone, sang. We were the stars of that tour, went all over the United States. And of course I did 3 seasons at Jones Beach. I was in Paradise Island, which was an original musical written by one of the Lombardo brothers, because Guy Lombardo was running the shows in the summertime. And then the other show that I did that was a big success was Around the World in 80 Days with Fritz Weaver and Robert Clary. And that was a great show.
Despite all that, did your popularity begin to ebb because you were no longer doing complete operas?
I think
NBC?
so.
Yeah.
Somewhat. And also my interest started to wane too. And I was looking forward to getting married. As a matter of fact, I did get married. Soon after that, I married in 1967. However, before then, I was in Europe, and I was still singing somewhat. And of course, you know, I sang in Glyndebourne in Edinburgh, and quite a lot on BBC. And I did my thing.
Well, let's turn to some more music, and later we'll talk about, among other things, the comeback that is about to be. What shall we play?
Let's do the Butterfly with Mario Lanza from the tape that is issued. It's come out in so many different versions.
So, the number 212-854-5223. You're listening, of course, to WKCR-FM New York, 89.9 on the dial. Opera Fanatic. I'm Stefan Zucker, the celebrity guest. Elaine Malbin. Other celebrities in the studio include Bob Connolly and Joe Pierce. Next week, Straniera, Bellini Straniera with Caballé. The following week, Mascagni's 2 puzzlingly different recordings of his Cavalleria Rusticana. One live from Holland, 1937, with Lina Bruna Raza, Antonio Melandri, and Afro Poli. The other, a studio recording from 1940, with Bruna Raza, Gigli, and Gino Becchi. Both are conducted by the composer. Quite a challenging evening. A number of issues will emerge. The following week, March 27th, Pasquale Amato, Mattia Battistini, Gino Becchi, Carlo Caleffi, Apollo Granforte, Riccardo Stracciari, and Tita Ruffo. All discussed by baritone Theodore Lambrino's guest. In April, Franco Corelli will return to the show, as will Adelaide Negri. Well, we'll hear the Butterfly Duet with Lanza. The number here, 212-854-5223. 854-5223. Questions for Elaine Malbin.
Vida gioie celestiali, come ora fa nei tuoi lunghi occhi ovali.
Adesso vuoi, se fai per me l'occhio da firmamento e mi piace che la prima momento che Dio vedo con modisti paletti e dite cose che mai non intendi. Son contenta, son contenta.
Farfalla.
Dico il contremare, se cadeva di me, ogni farfalla danzino e profeta, ed come aspetta.
Un po' di vero c'è, e tu lo sai perché non fugga più. Io con ghermita e ti serro palpitante, sei mia.
Sì, penno vita.
Vieni, via dall'anima in gelo, l'angoscia dorme ogni cosa.
Ah, dolce notte.
Vieni,
Quante stelle
Well, we just heard the Butterfly Duet sung by Mario LANZA and tonight's celebrity guest, Elaine Malbin. A good number of questions here. Cantor Robert Bloch. I remember Elaine Malbin as a very, very beautiful woman. What does she look like today?
We have to answer that. She can't answer that for herself.
Hello, Robert Bloch.
Well,
she's a charmer.
He's sweet. Thank you, Robert.
You'd have no trouble whatever recognizing her from her photos, not only because she has the same features, but because the visual charm is there. And I suspect the emanations must be the same too. She looks lovely. Too bad this is not TV. Robert Bloch continued. My notes are a little bit out of sequence here. Her comeback is indeed wonderful news. I always admired her voice for its exceptional beauty, intensity, and warmth. The intention of the text coming through the voice. A lot of gals could learn from her. Well, Elaine Malbin, you are doing some teaching.
Yes, I am. I'm teaching voice privately, but I'm also giving a master class in performance at the 92nd Street Y with a wonderful coach and accompanist named Robert Hess, who's a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, I started to teach at the Hart School of Music several years ago. I was an adjunctive teacher giving one-on-one voice lessons at Hart, and I did that for a few years, and that started me in that direction, and I rather enjoy it, but I'm very happy that now I can stay at home and just travel to New York City instead of having to drive all the way up to Hartford.
How can people get to study with you? What should they do?
Well, I don't know that I should give my personal telephone number over.
What about the Y?
Well, they can call the Y. I don't know the number offhand, but they can ask for the music department and tell whoever answers the phone that they'd like to take either voice lessons from Miss Malbin or come into my master class, which just started this week, and I would be very happy to meet them.
What is it in greater detail that you are doing in the master class?
What I'm doing with Mr. Hess is I'm giving first some vocal warm-ups at the beginning of the class, which is a 3-hour class. I do some voice technique and breathing, and then after everyone has been warmed up, everyone gets up and sings a song of his own choice. It could be a song, an aria from an opera, it could be a song from a show, a Broadway show, a musical theater show, or it could even be a song that one might do in cabaret or operetta. And then I work with that person on their interpretation and also on the vocal production of it. And in the end, Mr. Hess and I assign these people songs that we think are suitable to them. And at the end of the 10-week course, we're going to put on some kind of a performance.
Connie Ballantyne, an Elaine Malbin student, phoned to say, Elaine, you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you, Connie. Connie was my first voice student. She's a doll.
A.B. Liederman, a great show. I remember her Senza Mamma. I was friendly with Brian Sullivan until the day before he went to Europe. He said he had had an argument with Rudolph Bing. He'd gotten very fat, so said A.B. Liederman. Richard, well, let's see. We have calls from a number of listeners who evidently missed the first part of the broadcast. Richard Bell wants appraisals of Lanza that Ms. Malbin gave earlier at the show. I'm afraid we'll have to pass on that and some other questions that would be redundant for those who have been staying the course here. William Portella of New York City would like to know, when you studied sight singing, do you remember if you were taught the fixed do or the movable do?
I was taught the movable do.
He would like to know your recollections of Mimi Benzel.
Oh, she was a charming girl. And actually, I forgot the name of the person. Her husband, Walter Gould, was the producer of my tour of the music of Richard Rodgers. It was a Rodgers and Hammerstein, Rodgers and Hart concert tour. And Mimi and Walter were very good friends of mine. They lived in a nearby community called Manhasset. And she was a beautiful woman with a lovely voice. And I met Mimi many times when I was on tour, because at the time Mimi had left the Metropolitan Opera and was doing a nightclub act, and she did not like it, and she told me not to do it because I was following that route myself. She says, "Don't do it, Elaine."
What did you make of that advice?
Well, I did do it a few times, as I told you, and she was right. It was very difficult. You know, the hardest part is singing for 45 or 50 minutes and having to do 2 shows a night, every night. That is very difficult, especially when you're a soprano and don't want to belt. That's where I started to belt much too high. Therefore, I have my own personal opinion about bringing up the chest voice up.
I would think it frightfully difficult to compete with food and drink.
Well, I never had to compete in that area, because when I would appear in a club, it was always a place, a terrific place. I only sang at the best. I sang at the Fontainebleau in Florida. I sang at El San Juan in Puerto Rico, and then I had a fabulous engagement in Havana, Cuba, which is another story. I sang at the newly built Riviera Hotel just days before Castro came into Havana, and I was asked to sing at the Palace for Batista, and did. I was requested by our then ambassadors, Earl T. Smith.
We were
Stefan, do you remember that Mimi Benzel, when she did her nightclub act, advertised herself as Metropolitan Opera star, and Bing, she was no longer with the Met, and Bing got furious and took legal action to make her stop that.
We were aware in Cuba that a little something was going on, or was that
Yes,
no?
I was aware, because I was told not to venture out of the hotel, and actually I heard the tanks moving out of Havana, going into a little town called Matanzas, which I was very familiar with because it was either near or a wonderful place called Varadero Beach. It was a very fascinating time, but it was not a good time to be there, and right after my 2-week engagement, I went back to New York in haste.
Listeners, apologies for the racket here. There's nothing the station can do. It's an old issue. The university has rented the adjacent auditorium to a group putting on some sort of pop music extravaganza, as you can hear. Eventually they'll go home, and I hope it happens before we do. And there's been considerable discussion of soundproofing the studio more. Supposedly it is soundproof, but you can hear how effective that is. But to do an effective job would require building, would require really floating the complex of studios here on rubber. Joanne Krieg phoned to say 2 weeks ago a caller mentioned Victor Lanza. Do you know anything about him? The caller said he was an illegitimate son of Mario. Well, there's an ad for him in the current Musical America Directory of the Performing Arts. The Musical America monthly magazine went under, but the annual directory continues as a vehicle for managers advertising their talents, flesh peddling. Victor Lanza is in there, and by God, he looks like his dad, and he offers himself in concerts of selections associated with his dad. Does anybody here have something to say about Victor?
I have never, I'm something of an expert on Lanza, and I have never heard of such a thing before. In fact, about the only thing not attributed to Lanza during his career was two-timing his wife Betty. In fact, he was supremely dependent on her for everything.
But I thought Lanza slept with everything.
Not Lanza, not that I've heard.
Really? Gee, there are stories. People claim to have had threesies with Lanza being one of... Oh, well. Robert Deal phoned. I'm enjoying Malbin. She's candid, but I also adore Sills. She's done a tremendous job in popularizing opera. And what about Joan Sutherland? Elaine Malbin hasn't mentioned her.
Well, I loved Joan Sutherland. As a matter of fact, well, she certainly didn't popularize opera. What she did do is set a new standard for singing. I was in the house at Covent Garden in 1959 when Joan Sutherland sang her first Lucia di Lammermoor. And in the audience was Maria Callas. And it was an electric, fantastic performance. And I will say that these two ladies are my favorites. Joan Sutherland was just spectacular, and I adored her singing.
Robert Deal mentioned that he's recording the program on videotape and is getting an extremely good quality result. Indeed, I think that's probably the best way to go, recording on videotape, particularly if you have a hi-fi machine as opposed to one that merely has linear audio. Elaine Malbin, Sills, Sutherland, who's your favorite singer?
Sutherland.
Your favorite all-time singer?
Oh, my favorite all-time singer. I thought you would give me a choice.
Oh, all right. Take that if you like.
Oh, no. My favorite all-time singer, Victoria de Los Angeles.
Why do you feel that way?
Well, first of all, when I listen to that gorgeous quality voice, it's thrilling. When I've seen her sunny disposition and charming personage, she's just an adorable person. I love her style, I loved her voice, and I loved her personality.
Michele Simone phoned. I like Malbin for her passion and beauty of tone. Too bad she didn't pursue opera with the same passion. Too bad Lanza was lost to opera on account of Hollywood.
I agree on both counts. I agree with her. I'm sorry that I didn't. Perhaps in another life I will, and I think it was my psyche that got in my way, and I also regret it. However, and I must say, I talk about my two children, Amy and Julie Emanuel, daughters that I've had with Mr. George Emanuel, my husband, and I say, but I'm so happy that I have my children. However, in retrospect, there was no reason why I could not have continued my singing career and still enjoyed having this lovely family.
So you miss it?
Yes, I say that I do, and I'm filling up my time with the teaching a lot, but I think I would prefer to sing more and teach less, but I love being in music today and giving what I can, and I think the fact that I've been in so many different areas of musical life has enriched myself as well as my students.
Mrs. Mario del Monaco mentioned that when her husband retired, he began to die, for singing had been his life. Is it that bad for you?
No. Oh, that's interesting. Not now. Not now, because I'm so busy and so involved with music. And of course, when I did stop singing, I gave birth to my first daughter, Amy, and I had several engagements booked at that time, and I did them. I went to Washington, D.C. I did a big Viennese concert after Amy was born, and I took her with me when she was a year old to Ohio to do Madama Butterfly. But after that, I decided I found it very difficult to take her with me, and I just decided I didn't want to leave her, and then I stopped. And I think, you know what? I think that I died in 1962 and had a rebirth when I married and had my children.
Why did you die in 62?
Because I was emotionally very upset, and I decided I wasn't going to sing anymore at that time.
What upset you?
A romance, a bad romance.
Did he do bad things to you?
He was just a bad person.
Did you have a weakness for men who were not good to you?
No, I didn't have a weakness for men in general. It was just one specific person.
1962. You mentioned on the phone something in connection with appearing on the night Kennedy was assassinated.
That's correct. That was a... oh, God, I was engaged to sing Madama Butterfly around, the 24th and 25th of November. I think he was assassinated on the 23rd or 2nd. Right. And I was packing my bag to get ready to go to Boston to sing Butterfly for Fortune Gallo. Remember the Gallo company? And while I was packing, I had my TV turned on, and I heard this newscast saying that the president had been shot. And I was supposed to have luncheon with, remember Paul Grossinger of the Grossinger family? And he called me. It was shortly after 1 o'clock, and he said to me, Elaine, the president has been shot. And he said, we can't go out to lunch. I said, all right, of course I understand. And as I waited for the news, as everyone else did, then I heard that Kennedy was dead. I thought, we will never go on with those performances in Boston, which was his home. And so I called my agent, who was Lustig at the time, and I said, shall I get on the train? Shall I go to Boston? He said, well, I haven't heard otherwise. He said, unless you hear differently, you have to go. And so I think it was that night or late in the afternoon that I boarded a train and went to Boston, and Carla Moresco was conducting, and they went on with the performances, and of course Boston was just completely closed up, and we performed in a huge theater there. I don't remember the name of it, but there was a handful of people there, and I believe that was the last performance that the Gallos ever put on in terms of grand opera. They must have lost thousands and thousands of dollars. And on my way home from that performance, I heard on a radio in the club car of the train Oswald being shot by Jack Ruby.
You made a comeback once before, and in connection with one of the Ottilie Hall appearances at that time, appeared on this program, and we spoke.
Oh, yes.
Here's a review from Donald Hanahan. Admittedly, he, in general, was pretty dim-witted, but here's what he had to say about Malbin. It's rather interesting. Listeners, and particularly subscribers to Opera Fanatic, have fun collecting his gaffes, his misinformation, O mio bambino caro, being an aria in Turandot, that kind of thing. But still, what he said about Elaine Malbin is to the point. She was a soprano of established international standing when she decided to take a leave of absence and raise a family. She was not the first, of course, to do that. Lily Chukasian, for one, returned to opera after a similar withdrawal and enjoyed a major career at the Met. Still, it cannot be easy to keep alive the requisite professionalism and discipline during such a hiatus, not to mention vocal quality. So Miss Malbin's return to the New York stage on Sunday night at Tully Hall had an air of suspense. To be quick about it, Miss Malbin's second debut was a success, even though not unalloyed. She's still a little beauty, maturely glamorous, and she still can sing. One can think of several American companies whose roster she would fit into with ease. She struck nothing but pure gold in the second half of the recital, with songs of Turina, Rodrigo, Granados, and Falla, most particularly with her enraptured incantation of Granados' La Maja y el Ruiseñor. Martin Smith, the pianist, also had his best moments here. Unless memory deceives this reviewer, Miss Malbin's voice never was enormous, but it had a lyric clarity that carried. That has not changed. The voice's range and coloratura ability seemed little impaired, and she interpreted some Strauss songs with silvery tone and wit to match. For the first New York performance of Seymour Barab's Bagatelles, the composer gave the singer wonderful opportunities for vocal and poetic subtleties. Miss Malbin made much of these opportunities too, although she would have been more effective if she could have dispensed with the printed music. She had to follow the notes so assiduously at times that she sacrificed the feeling of spontaneity and audience involvement that made most of her recitals so worthwhile. So declared Donald Hanahan. Well, since New York critics, myself among them, don't give, as Scarpia would say, grazia aperta, open mercy, a gush. By time standards, a gush indeed. So you sang some performances. You did Cleopatra at the Kennedy Center, Cleopatra and Giulio Cesare. You did something in Orlando, Florida.
Yes. I did a charming show by Noel Coward with Roberta Peters, Bittersweet. I played the second female role, the role of Manon, who was known as La Crevette.
And then...
We're all. That's the big song.
And then...
Yes, If Love Were All.
Yeah, and then you returned to Great Neck.
Yes.
Why?
Well, no particular reason. Actually, when I did that recital, I did not intend to make a comeback. That's the thing. I can never be completely decisive in what I'm doing. I had done the Julius Caesar in Washington, which I love doing, and I just said to myself, I wonder how I would be received if I did a recital in New York, and that was the entire reason for my doing it. And I was extremely well received. I got great reviews really in all the New York papers. And my colleague Roberta, who's also a friend of mine, she called me up after the concert. She didn't hear it. And she said to me, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't have anything on my agenda. I said, you know, Roberta, I have very young children. And I did. At that time, they may have been maybe 12 and 14 or 10 and 12, something like that. And her answer to me was, well, that isn't very fair to you. But in my own mind, I still felt that my first allegiance was to my family, and I didn't, you know, it was I who didn't want to go. I was not a feminist. Feminist groups wanted me to say that I gave up my career. I had to give up my career because I had to stay with my children, but that is not true. One had nothing to do with the other. For some reason only known to myself, and I'm not going to tell that on this program, I didn't want to go on with my singing career. I'm always wondering, am I still good? Will people still like me? Can I still sing? So I gave that recital. I stayed home with my children because I wanted to do that. Had nothing to do with the singing at all.
Well, to let the cat out of the bag, it struck me, it's all long struck me that there are some important performers, people capable of spellbinding audiences who go unheard. Among them, Elaine Malbin. So I decided to do something about that, and putting on, for starts, 2 galas, one in Wayne, New Jersey, April 22nd, at the Maurice Levin Center, the other at Gould Hall on April 27th. And, of course, I immediately phoned Elaine Malbin to see if she had the bug, and was thrilled to learn that she did. So she'll be doing those appearances, and if the bug continues to prey on her, perhaps New York will hear more of her, and New Jersey. Shall we turn to some music?
All right. Do you want to continue, or would you like to play that? It's quite a long piece.
You tell us.
I recorded the Arlecchino. That's on the second tape I brought.
Terrific. Frankly, it's excruciatingly painful to have the loudest background music ever. This is an all-time record, this racket
and
in the background.
And then following that is a section of the telecast that I did with NBC on one of my favorite roles, Suor Angelica.
Well, among other things, listeners, when we play music, won't hear the din in the background. Suor Angelica, preceded by Busoni's Arlecchino. Would you tell us a bit about that, the Arlecchino?
Well, the Arlecchino is a commedia dell'arte opera, I play the role. If you've seen Pagliacci, the second act of Pagliacci, where Nedda plays the role of Columbine, and there's the Harlequin, and then poor Pagliacci plays the husband who has been cuckolded, is this exact story of the Busoni Arlecchino.
The number here on WKCR-FM New York, 212-854-5223. That's 854-5223. I'm Stefan Zucker. She's Elaine Malbin, chiming in. Bob Connolly and Joe Pierce, divi in their own rights. Stand by one moment. Miss Malbin is digging out the right cassette. Right, here we go.
Doch dieses Gemiaule macht mich ungesund. Oh, Columbina, siehst du jenen Stern? Betracht ihn dir genau, betracht ihn lang. Und wär er ein Unheilskomet, ich könnte mich nicht eiger davon retten.
Why don't you answer? Oh, why? Why? I cannot hear you! And to you will be condemned forever! The Blessed Virgin watches us. Speak now, and she will judge. 2 years ago, the child you bore was taken ill. We did all we could to save him. He's dead. just my son, I can feel your blessed presence. How long till I come? Oh, tell me when I shall see you in heaven. When shall we meet again? For sweetest end to all my bitterness sorrows. Will my prayers bring an end to all my toiling? In heaven I will I'll join you soon in heaven. Yes, soon in heaven. I lift my eyes to you in prayer, my baby. Send me your answer through the stars. Your prayers will be answered, my sister. Give thanks to Our Lady of Mercy. Rejoice and be happy, my sister. Our Lady will send you her blessing. Grace hath descended upon me, with beholding all understanding. I see now the end of my joy in my soul.
Elaine Malbin, swore Angelica, heart-wrenching. A couple of little spinal chills I rarely get them these days. It's nice to remember my spine is still there, still capable of experiencing that. A number of listener calls. Let's see. Buddy Chrysler, president of New York Audio. I sang at a New Year's party in Great Neck at the house of Seema Milstein, Mr. Chrysler said. Elaine Malbin sang and sounded better than on the records. So said Buddy Chrysler. Robert Miller phoned. I'm loving this show. I think he was the one who said that the noise wasn't bad. Wait, I'm muddling calls from two people. The noise is not bad from the auditorium adjacent here. To me, it sounds deafening. A caller by the name of Robin said, I like the program. Do you ever play or speak about Eileen Farrell? Well, I'm trying to inveigle her to come here, but she seldom descends from Maine. Yarborough, is it? Somewhere up there. And so the logistics haven't worked out, particularly because until recently, for some years, I was hosting only every other week. Do you have comments about Eileen Farrell, Elaine Malbin?
Well, I don't really know Eileen Farrell personally, but I have heard her sing, and of course she has one of the great voices of our time. I think that Eileen Farrell also should have had a much greater career, but frankly I don't think she was interested in it. She has this magnificent voice, but I attended recitals where she stood on stage and read the words of every song, not just one little group, which is what I did at my last Alice Telly, because I got tired of learning all that new music, and I was getting a little bit too old for it, and I suppose she feels the same way, but more so. But she does have a great voice.
Jeffrey Nelson phoned to say, why don't you mention your work with Toscanini?
Well, the reason I haven't mentioned Toscanini is because I never sang with Toscanini conducting. I sang hundreds of times with the NBC Symphony Orchestra, and certainly Toscanini was a tremendous influence on my life and also my musicianship just by being in his presence, and I was, because I attended all of those Sunday concerts. But I never actually sang under his baton. However, his presence was very recognizable when I used to do the NBC operas, because he used to hover around the set.
I'm told that he was a fan of yours.
Yes, he did express admiration for me, which was conveyed to me by Samuel Schatzenoff, who was the person who brought Toscanini to this country. And also, I was told that when Toscanini learned that NBC Opera was planning to do a repeat of the Suor Angelica, but it was a new production, a live performance, only to have, because they didn't want a year to go by without my doing a performance for them, he said, why Suor Angelica? Because he didn't think it was one of the great Puccini operas. And they said, well, it's a great vehicle for Miss Malbin. And supposedly after he heard me do it, he said now he understood why they would want to do it, because I know that he was very into the emotion of the operas.
Dr. Vita phoned. I'm thoroughly enjoying the program. Elaine Malbin is charming. 40 years ago, I was a student at New Utrecht High School, and she was a soloist in a concert there. Her Italian is not only quite good, but also expressive. Elaine Malbin, Dr. Vita asks, where did you do your language study?
Privately. I had a teacher called Dolores Colorni who taught Italian. I studied everything privately. I studied voice privately. I studied piano privately. I studied French, Italian, and German privately.
Kenneth Lane, what has always come across when seeing and hearing you, Elaine Malbin, when seeing and hearing you sing, is the gleaming clarity of your singing and the sympathetic sincerity of your characterizations without trace of artifice. We have here a call from a voice teacher who refused to give her name, so I'll just call because she's a fellow member of a voice teacher organization with you. But she took a shot at you, and I'll call her Kathy. And the shot is, what does she have to say about her bleat? That's faulty technique. Well, let me speak to that since I've published on vibrato. I've said this here in much greater detail than I will now, in part because I have said it before, but from Rubini in 1816 until after World War II, most Italian and French singers, Slavs as well, sang with omnipresent, conspicuous, fast vibrato. Few did not. Anglo-Saxons always rejected this, and a number of famous singers, De Lucia comes to mind, many others, were rejected here because of vibrato. From a musical point of view, arguments across a span of nearly 150 years have raged as to whether vibrato is a good thing or bad, the Elaine Malbin sort of vibrato. The argument against it, in my view, the most telling argument against it, is that if it is beyond control, so that on, say, the resolution of dissonance, the tone has a great deal of activity in it, it's hard to achieve harmonic repose. Yet the most heart-wrenching singers of the Verdismo period, almost without exception, did have it. I think Elaine Malbin's singing is a telling reason in its favor. Bob Connolly has always been beguiled by vibrato. I don't know what Joe Pierce's position is. I think he's fairly Catholic in his taste.
I think without it, her singing would be less exciting and less moving.
Could be. Even the most famous 19th century English critic Henry Chorley, a die-hard opponent of vibrato, who labeled it that vice of young Italy and false notions of effect, did allow that with it one was able to obtain emotional results otherwise unachievable. Elaine Malbin, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, I think that we touched on the subject much earlier. I believe that if I had an excessive vibrato during some of these recordings that we played, because people who are listening to them must understand that those recordings were made between 1947, let us say, and the Suor Angelica was about 56, 57, that during that period of time, I really had not studied voice that much. And sometimes I was put under tremendous amount of pressure by the engagements that I was doing, and it might very well be too much because I may have been tired. For example, when I recorded with Mario LANZA, I was 19 years old and was sent to California, and we did those tapes over and over again. And at that time, they never spliced tapes, and that vibrato or excessive vibrato is the result of too much singing, period. I think if this person would hear me sing today, she wouldn't have that complaint. And perhaps it's a pity, because there are certain schools that love the vibrato, and I've heard some very big singers today who have a very fast vibrato, and it adds to the beauty of the voice. But of course, if it is out of control, then one has to do something about it. But I would not take umbrage at that comment. I think I mentioned it earlier.
Elaine Malbin, is your singing as affecting without it?
Well, you'll have to come to they'll have to come to the Bel Canto concert on April 27th at the Florence Gould Auditorium to find out. I think probably they'll be very amazed. I once sang for Robert Sherman when I did the recital, the Alice Tully recital, and when I sang live in his studio, and he said to me, well, you sound better now than you did 20 years ago. So perhaps the same will be true in a few weeks.
Speaking of singing teachers and that breed, the New York Singing Teachers Association is honoring Justino Diaz at the Hilton on March 21st. Why did you want me to mention that?
Well, I am a member of the New York Singing Teachers Association, and I'm an officer. It is my friend who accompanied here, Loretta Kogut, and we would like a nice turnout for Diaz. This is our annual luncheon, and since you were nice enough to allow me to mention it, this is an open luncheon to anyone who's interested in the opera, and we would like to have as many people attending as possible. That's why.
Well,
I'm very loyal to the organization.
Those who are intrigued at the spectacle of a mob of crazies might want to have a go at this, for you'll be surrounded by singing teachers and a loonier bunch there couldn't be. What will the food be like?
Oh, they have a very nice luncheon. It's a set luncheon. It costs $45 a person, and we are serving a 3-course luncheon that includes some kind of chicken dish, a Caesar salad, dessert, wine, coffee, and Robert Sherman is going to be a guest speaker, and they are having an entertainment. I think it's called 99% art-free or something like that. But it's going to be a very nice afternoon.
Is there a particular reason why they're honoring Justino Diaz?
Yes, every year the New York Singing Teachers Association selects an American singer who has achieved for himself and for all American singers great notoriety and who has done well in the world of grand opera.
The last I knew, Justino had no particular liking for any one voice teacher. He studied...
I can understand that.
But he's held up. I was in the audience at the Liederkranz Society back in 1962 when they gave their award to a promising young bass, Justino Diaz, and I think he was 23 at the time. He walked out, he was very handsome, looked like a kid, and he opened his voice and this big booming bass came out, and he's still around 31 years later, and these days that's something.
Whom did we honor last year, Loretta? Do you remember? No. Well, we've honored Martina Arroyo, and we've honored Samuel Ramey and James King and James Morris. We wanted to honor Jessie Norman, but she's very difficult to pin down to a date. So this year we're honoring Justino Diaz.
And you accuse the Tucker Foundation of anointing those who are already in heaven.
But, yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, you're no better. You're every bit as redundant.
Well, we need an excuse to have a nice luncheon.
Stefan wouldn't say that if you were honoring him at that luncheon. He's a great American singer.
Oh, that's right. Well, you have to get on our short list.
They tear me to bits. Those singing teachers.
They just tore me to bits. I'm sure that woman is a member of the New York Singing team. But I always say to Loretta, I said, well, what have they done? You know, when people
that's right.
I said, well, what do they know? What have they done?
Yeah, when voice... I use a very old technique that fell into disuse for the most part well over 100 years ago. And voice teachers have one of two views about me. Usually, oh, Stefan, if you study with me and give up that ridiculous technique of yours, you'd be at the Met next year. And then, of course, there are those who say, well, it's remarkable that you're able to do what you do, given that you've got no voice. You must be all technique. But one way or another, they will zap you as a group because they don't agree about anything. And each one thinks the other's charlatans. And most of them subscribe to the notion, one God, one country, one singing technique. And don't allow for different singing, only for bad singing, namely all singing that doesn't conform to the maxims of the voice teacher in question. Barbarians intellectually. You're not championing them, I notice.
Beg pardon?
You are not championing them.
No, I don't champion a particular group, actually. I'm just a member of them. What interests me and makes me want to be a member of New York Singing Teachers is that I think basically they are mostly very sincere people, each of whom has a certain knowledge, and they are very sincere in trying to impart it and do the best they can with the material they have. And also they try to promote, or we try to promote, healthy singing. That's what the main thing is, that people don't get into dire trouble vocally and have all kinds of physical problems with nodules and all these other very serious things that happen to singers, like hemorrhages of vocal cords, etc.
Yet you allow mechanists in your midst, people who manipulate this or that part of the anatomy.
Yes, we have people like that.
Yeah, you don't even ban them, but you promulgate this notion of healthy singing.
We
Interesting.
do.
Yeah. Much controversy.
That's a rather interesting subject that we could do another whole program on. Right.
Let's hear more music.
All right.
With her.
Well, let's go back to this tape then, which I think is from... Oh, this is an interview. We have to go past the butterfly. There's a repeat of the butterfly.
Wait, that's going to be tough to find under these circumstances.
Right. Then go on to this one that, if you think it's good enough, it's from my Alice Tully recital, an aria from La Vida Breve.
So, what we heard, this word Angelica, was from an actual telecast, hence the clicks and pops. Elaine Malbin probably has an acetate of that, and has played it, as you can hear, plentifully. So anyway, you've got something from your Tully concert?
Yes, which a friend of mine taped, and the small little recorder on her lap, including her comments, so we'll see how that turns out.
What selections?
It is one of the arias from La Vida Breve.
Right. 212-854-5223, Opera Fanatic. I'm Stefan Zucker. She's Elaine Malbin.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firestone, the name that stands for highest quality in tires and tubes, and in hundreds of other products for cars and trucks, as well as for outstanding values in products for home and farm, and for work and recreation. Manufacturer of Foamex, the foam rubber cushioning widely used for mattresses, furniture, footwear, and transportation seating. And Volan, the amazing plastic used in rainwear, luggage, and curtains, presents The Voice of Firestone, the program that brings you music that never grows old on regular radio, FM, and television. Featuring Wilfred Pelletier conducting the Firestone Orchestra and Chorus, and the soprano star of the current Broadway musical play Kismet, Elaine Malbin.
If I could tell you of my devotion, if I could pledge all my love to you, then my confession would find expression in all the music my
The current Broadway musical play Kismet, in which Elaine Malbin sings the leading role, features music by Robert Wright and George Forrest, based on Alexander Borodin's score for his colorful opera Prince Igor. As her first song, Elaine Malbin sings one of the hits from Kismet, Stranger in Paradise.
Why do the leaves on the mulberry tree whisper differently now? And why is the nightingale singing at noon on the mulberry vow. For some most mysterious reason, this isn't the garden I know. Paradise now, that was only your garden a moment ago. Take my hand, I'm a stranger in paradise, lost in a wonderland, a stranger in paradise. If I stand starry-eyed, like a stranger in paradise, for mortal to stand beside an angel like you. I saw your face, and I ascended out of the common place into the real, somewhere in space. I hang suspended until I know there's a chance that you care. Won't you answer the fervent prayer of a stranger in paradise? Don't send me in darkness there from all that I hunger for open your angel's arms to the stranger in paradise, and tell me that I need a
In the first act of Ruggiero Leoncavallo's opera Pagliacci, Nedda gazes in rapture at the bright sun and blue sky and follows the flight of the birds as they wing their way through the air. In a gay mood, she sings a beautiful aria, which Elaine Malbin in the role of Nedda sings next, Che volo d'ogelli, the bird song.
Di vita e sul
So, Elaine Malbin,
to hear her, and then came across to hear me at Alice Tully, and happened to hear the Spanish group, and gave me a very fine review, and lamented the fact that she wasn't in very good voice.
well, some news here. When we were talking before this last batch of musical selections, the phone kept ringing, and I thought to myself, oh, a new listener who doesn't realize that the phone goes unanswered here when people are on mic. And I picked up the phone, and the man identified himself as Charles Rieger of the Metropolitan Opera, the great behind-the-scenes doer and shaker. And he called quite simply to ask me to ask Elaine Malbin to phone him next week. I asked, do you have something for her? He was a little bit non-committal, but indicated that yes, indeed, they might very well have something. He wasn't at all specific. Now, Elaine Malbin, you refused to believe that that was really Charles Rieger, assuming that it was a practical joke. I think not, although I think I only spoke with Charles Rieger once many years ago and wouldn't recognize the voice, but still somehow something about this caller convinced me completely that I was speaking with the Charles Rieger. Oh, comments?
Well, I think it's a practical joke, but I'm very flattered that anyone would take the time and the effort to try to impress upon me that I'm so provocative at this time that they would be willing to pose as Rieger and perhaps suggest to the Met to offer me a part. As a matter of fact, I would not say no at this point. As a matter of fact, I heard the opera Janufa recently with Benashkova, who was superb, and Rieseneck, who was magnificent. And I thought, my God, if Rieseneck can sing at her age, why not I?
How has your voice changed across the years?
Not that much, but I have to assure the voice teacher who called, commenting upon my vibrato, that it is quite under control. She doesn't seem to understand that most of these records were made when I was very young, in my early 20s, starting in my teens, actually, and I may have been under great strain and did not have a voice teacher at the time. So if she was offended by anything, let us assume that it was because I was not studying with one of the great teachers, preferably one who belongs to NYSTA.
Joseph, that's the New York Singing Teachers Association. Joseph Najavitz phoned a super-duper program. Elaine Malbin is a joy. I have a correction for Bob Connolly, Mr. Javits continued. Edwin MacArthur never conducted at the Met. The best Flagstad could do for her lover, that's always been controversial, many having said that he was gay, was one shot at Walküre with the Met on tour in Philadelphia. It was so lousy, Mr. Najavitz continued, that it ended his Met conducting career. Ed Gonzalez...
I think this correction was for...
Yeah, for me, I'm the one who said
Joe Pierce.
Yeah.
Ed Gonzalez phoned. I remember Elaine Malbin with the Rossini Opera Workshop before the NBC broadcast.
That's right. That's where I got some of my training, by the way. And I'm glad he called because I intended to talk about Hulda Rossini, who's still living. Hulda Rossini and her husband had a small opera class in their beautiful apartment on Central Park West. And I studied my operas with them. It was like an opera workshop, actually, and was extremely helpful in getting me from being a novice onto the stage.
Much earlier, Monty Waldman phoned to say, I heard Elaine Malbin in the omnibus Traviata. She made me fall in love with the opera. Indeed, I wept. That performance turned me on to opera. Alas, apparently it was not with Elaine Malbin, but so Joe Pierce says
Was that the Traviata or Bohème, he said?
Perhaps Bohème.
I might have done the Traviata, but I don't believe I did the Bohème. I really don't remember. I've done other vignettes of scenes from Traviata and Bohème and Butterfly, but I don't remember doing it on Omnibus.
Well, the Omnibus Bohème was Brian Sullivan and Nadine Kara.
Oh, well, that I know I didn't do. Right.
Ken Lane, Stefan, you were right in targeting those singing teachers. Singers who make it big, end up experimenting a great deal and finding out what works for them. In essence, I think Mr. Lane was saying later, one technique does not work for everyone. Brown and Kramer phoned. The first mention of vibrato is in David Boyden's History of Viol Playing from 1530. Vibrato is always better than straight tone, except when straight tone is used for expressive purposes. When Charles Burney first heard an Italian cello player who came to London and played with vibrato in the 18th century, he said, "That's the way we have to play from now on." The issue, according to Mr. Kramer, is not vibrato versus non-vibrato, but good vibrato versus bad vibrato. Elaine Malbin, he said, has good vibrato.
May I add something here? I remember years ago when I sang with the Philadelphia Orchestra, a great orchestra, the concertmaster said to me, "Your vibrato reminds me of Heifetz's playing on the violin." So I think he meant that as a compliment.
Concluding, Mr. Kramer declared bad vibrato is wow, wobble, which is... Pardon?
Tremolo.
Well, tremolo in string playing also is used to mean pulsing of tone in volume. In any event, wobble, according to Mr. Kramer, commands the voice rather than the voice commanding it, the vibrato. Elisabeth Schumann has a wonderful range of vibrato from a good deal to very, very little. Elaine Malbin's varies from fast to not so fast. She never produces an ugly sound. So declared Brown and Kramer.
Oh, thank you.
Lillian Anton phoned. Stefan, another great show. Thank you. Tibaldi's name hasn't come up all evening. Would Elaine Malbin please comment on her?
Well, I love Tibaldi singing. She has and had one of the great voices of our time, and I never really compared her with any other singer because she bears no comparison. I think her voice was magnificent. I don't think she was the actress that Halasz was. However, she was a perfect jewel unto herself, and I loved her singing very much. And her personality.
More music.
All right. Let's play... Did we play that last tape to the end?
I don't know.
Well, then let's see what's on this one.
I have an aria from Robert Le Diable, if you want.
I don't know. Let's see what's on this.
I'm dying to hear something recent, if you have such. Not with you.
On the other side.
It would take too much fishing.
Yeah, then just play it to the end.
Okay, so what is it we're to hear now?
I don't know at this point. You keep telling people what it's going to be, and it seems to be something else. Oh, I think this might be the tape with Mike Wallace. You might not want to hear that at this point.
Why not?
All right. How long are we going?
Well, the host, I guess till 6, the host of...
I have to go home.
The host of Jazz Till Dawn not having shown up. He'll probably come momentarily. 5:30, something like that. The number 212-854-5223. For those who missed it, next week, Bellini's La Straniera with Montserrat Caballé. 2 weeks from tonight, Saturday, March 20th, from 10:30 p.m. until 2 a.m., 2 recordings of Cavalleria Rusticana, both conducted by Mascagni, very different from one another, challengingly different. 3 weeks from tonight, Theodore Lambrino's guest in an all-baritone program, Pasquale Amato. Please no whispering on mic. Mattia Battistini, Gino Becchi, Carlo Galeffi, Apollo Granforte, Riccardo Stracciari, and Dida Ruffo. So, Elaine Malbin now. 212-854-5223. Please stand by. We're switching tapes. her singing is better than her organization of tapes. Okay, they're searching for more material. Let me repeat a comment that just came in from the aforementioned voice teacher, Kathy, who wants me to withhold her last name. She's well known to me. She asks, what would you say as a singing teacher to a student who came to you with the vibrato that you have on these records and tapes?
Well, I don't think that you can just generalize and say that I had an excessive vibrato on all of those tapes, but I've had several students who have come to me with vibratos, and what I have said to them is that the reason they have the vibrato because they are singing with tension in their throat, and since I had studied with a very fine teacher who died in the past couple of years, Anna Hamlin, I know exactly how to get the vibrato out. Beg pardon?
I didn't know. Huh.
Yes, she did pass on. And I would give them many exercises that uses a very fluty, floaty ooh sound, and get the person to bring the voice more forward and use also the very heady sound, and just not have that throat tension, and also to use their breath when they sang in a very even stream, flow of air. And now I have to say to her, what would she do if she was faced with that problem?
Let's not get her started. We have here a Bob Conley tape.
This is the Tully Hall recital. This gorgeous aria from Robert Le Diable by
Meyerbeer.
Again recorded, never intended for public performance. A cheap little Sony on my lap, but
in that case, maybe we.
Well, no, it's
something.
all right.
Yeah.
I have all of her Victor records here. I think this is probably okay.
The number 212-854-5223. Jazz Till Dawn is nowhere to be seen. Au Robert, toi que j'aime, from Robert le Diable, from Alice Tully Hall. Well, Elaine Malbin. Some listener comments. John Miller, a very special evening. She's delightful. Michael Mark remarked in American Record Guide, Supervia had a very prominent vibrato. Some have found it more liability than asset. I'm crazy about it. So said John Miller, quoting a review in American Record Guide. Well, Elaine Malbin is making a comeback. 2 performances in April. Did you want to, what will you be singing, Elaine?
What will I be singing?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to do a wonderful aria. It is an aria from Emily Kallmann's Countess Maritza. It's her entrance. And I will sing Meine Lippen, sie küssen so heiß. And I will most probably be doing a duet from Madama Butterfly with, I hope, Jerry LaMonaco, if he feels that he wants to do it. And who knows, I might even sing this aria from Roberto Diable, or perhaps the Senza Mama in Italian this time from Suor Angelica. Anyway, I'm going to be singing at the Maurice Levine Hall in Wayne, New Jersey on April 22nd, and on April 27th in New York City at the Florence Gould Hall. And I hope that all of Stefan Zucker's listeners, all you opera fanatics, will attend. And I'm going to go home now, Stephen. Good night.
Well, okay, Jazz Till Dawn isn't quite ready. The host is here, but I think he's assembling discs to play. I wonder if there's just a little bit of music we could play in the meantime.
Would you like to hear her sing Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life with Jimmy Carroll?
Why not?
We are the only 3 people.
I don't have that.
Yeah.
But I saw Jimmy Carroll fairly recently. And Bob is a great fan of Jimmy's, and he's another one of my good old friends who is not only a very fine singer, but he's a great pianist.
I love Jimmy Carroll.
Wait, I'm afraid Jazz Till Dawn is ready. I think it's ready. What's happening? Start that?
Okay, well, good night. It's been fun.
Thank you.